Buenas tardes. Vamos.
Hi, good afternoon. Let's commence the press conference of the film of the official section for those who can tell no tales. And we have for this, we've got the director Jasmina Zbanic, the actress Kim Vercoe, and the scriptwriter Doran Somund. So they're eagerly awaiting for your questions. Okay, so for first question, please. Who wants to break the ice? Please raise your hand, whoever wants to ask the first question. Yes, there's one back there, it seems. Yes. For the director, good afternoon. I would like to ask you, I imagine, and I deduce from the film that we're dealing with a real-life case, an episode that you're addressing in the film. But I would like, on the one hand, to please answer that, whether it's a real, it's a true story, and whether it's a true fact. How did you decide to address it, for it to not be strictly a documentary? What did you think about vis-a-vis the shooting of the film, therefore?
Hello. So the film is scripted, which means we wrote the script for it, but it is based on a true story of Kim Vercoe. She can tell you more about it, about her experience of her traveling through Bosnia. We decided when, okay, I will go a little bit in the past. I wanted to make a film that will deal with Bosnia 20 years after the war. I wanted to do something which is telling what my country is and what my feelings are 20 years after war started. So I was looking for the story that will show these emotions. And when I saw theater performance of Kim Vercoe, because she's a theater artist, I thought, and she did the whole, you know, the theater performance was based on her experience going through Visegrad and going back. And I said, okay, this is what I want to say. And I asked Kim if she would like us to make a movie about it. So everything is factual. There are real events, what happened to Kim, but we decided to have professional actors for each episode, and of course it was only natural that Kim plays herself, because it was her story. In a way, it's a border between documentary and fiction, because it is real people and real events that happen. Visegrad is a place that in '92, you know, 1,785 people were slaughtered in 2 first months of the war. 200 women were raped in Hotel Villain of Las. Villain of Las exists. All these things are factual, but we wanted to make it as a fiction story, which is dealing not only about the war, but it's about what human beings today can do when they find out about issues like that.
Good morning. I have a question. The problems you show on the film, like this code of silence that there is in Bosnia, did you find such problems while shooting or for shooting the movie? Thank you.
Sorry, did we find silence in Visegrad?
These kind of problems you show in the movie, this code of silence that people don't want to speak about that. Did you find these kind of problems when shooting the film, while filming, or finding the locations, getting in touch with people, getting permissions?
Yes, I would also like Zoran and Kim to tell their part of the story, but because I live in Sarajevo and I live in Bosnia, so I know exactly how this denial and silence is in everyday life. You know, how we do not communicate about what happened, or we communicate in a very aggressive or false way, covering numbers, covering of what happened. So I knew that going to Visegrad will not be easy, and many people advise us not to go, but it was not possible to shoot this film without going there. So actually we had to make, we didn't say what we are filming, and Zoran, who is also, I mean, he's co-writer of the story, but he's also director. Well, I asked him as a friend to be on the shooting, as false director who will pretend he's making another film because he's Serbian. Are you Serbian? You're German?
I don't have Muslim name. This is that was the criteria.
And also you have accent,
Yes,
which is
yes,
right.
Belgrade accent.
Belgrade accent, which was right to protect us from questions. But Kim, maybe you should say, how was your feeling there?
It was quite interesting shooting in Visegrad. I totally agree with Jasmila. From the very first conversation we had, we decided we had to shoot the film in Visegrad. We wouldn't sort of consider any other option. So to shoot there, we told everyone the first half of the film, it's about an Australian tourist who visits Visegrad because she has an interest in this book by Ivo Andrić. And so that was the premise for the film. And obviously it's a small town and we were amongst all the people there. And I really believe that code of silence completely exists. Even when we were shooting on location outside Vila na Vlas, we were also shooting at another place called Pioniska Street, which is the destroyed house you see very early in the film. And this was a site of a major atrocity in Visegrad. And we were very nervous about shooting there because we felt that by being there we were perhaps giving ourselves away. But it was interesting, it was a very snowy day and the local shop owner right next to the site invited us in and to keep warm. So my feeling is always that everything is not only silent but almost forgotten, that the silence and the denial and the repression of the recent past is so strong that I don't think people really considered that we were doing anything other than what we presented. But it was interesting to be shooting a film where I wasn't allowed to say my director's name. So we'd been advised not to use Jasmila's name because it's a Muslim name and also she's also a recognizable identity, I suppose, in Bosnia. So that was an interesting challenge.
Sí. Ahora llega el micrófono, un momentito.
My name is Paul Katzenberger from Germany. I have a question to Kim and also to Jasmila. One question. The question to Kim is, so you are a theater actress and you did this journey to Bosnia and consequent, when you came back to Australia, you performed on stage.
Yes.
And that's where you were discovered by Jasmila, who happened to be in Australia.
Not quite. Do you have a further question, or would you like me to address
I have another
that?
question then to Jasmila. This guy Tim in the film, who is a tour guide, American tour guide, you don't show him as an indifferent person. He seems to care about the problem. He doesn't lie about it when he's confronted. But what do you think about his attitude towards the problem?
Shall I answer the first? The theatre performance was created in Australia. It's called 7 Kilometres Northeast. And I performed it originally in Sydney, and then I was invited to come to Sarajevo in 2011. And I did 2 performances in Sarajevo, which were very beautiful and very well received. And Jasmila had been invited, but she was out of Sarajevo at the time. And when she came back, the story goes that everyone was talking to her about this theatre performance. Did you see this show? Did you see it? And she eventually got so annoyed that everyone was talking about it that she asked to see a copy of the DVD. And she watched the DVD and then she contacted me.
Yes, Tim Clancy is actually also a real character. He's a friend of mine. And what happened to Kim is that she read this tourist guidebook like in a film, and then she went back to Bosnia and contacted him. And that's were the words he used. So when we decided to make a film, we talked to Tim and we said, look, do you want us to use your name because he's a well-known writer of the guidebooks, or that we change it? And he said, use it, which was great from him. His argument is very ambivalent. You know, on one hand, he really cares. He lives in Bosnia, he's married to a Bosnian woman, he really wants Bosnia to progress. But on the other hand, I personally don't agree with facts. Let's forget the past and let's move on. I think it's very important to talk about the past, to kind of solve it and go on. I don't believe in future without solving the past.
If I could also, can I talk to that a little bit as well? That when I first met Tim, I mean, it's hard to capture that experience in a film, in a small scene. It was a very long meeting and we had a long discussion, and it's interesting for me that with all the decisions and difficult decisions that he has to make creating a guidebook for Bosnia, he acknowledged immediately that he had made the wrong decision, and I thought that was really interesting. So even though he had those arguments, he also totally took on board what I was saying to him.
And he, next edition of the guidebook doesn't have Vilina Vlas as a recommendation place to stay.
Yes, so he removed the recommendation, and yes.
Yes.
Because I agree with him to some extent. I agree with him to some extent, not to mention it maybe in the text or in the guidebook, because his argument has some truth to it, I think.
Yes, definitely.
¿Más preguntas, por favor? Sí.
The questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. The question on shooting in Visegrad is very much what I wanted to ask, but your answer raises another couple of questions. Surely, Kim, you are the author of a play and the book about a previous visit to Visegrad. Surely therefore, it must have been more difficult for you to be anonymous. That's one question. And the other question is, were you worried that what you had to do forced you into your own code of silence?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I was a bit nervous about being recognised. It was, however, a year since I'd been in Visegrad, and then when we went back for the winter shooting, it was 2 years since I'd originally been there. And a couple of people did recognise me. The owner of the sweet shop remembered me, which says a lot about me. But it was interesting being there. I noticed I could remember a person, and I thought, he's the guy that drove the taxi when I went back to Vilina Vlas. And so I do feel like I know the town, but it's just big enough, I think, that I could feel quite anonymous. And I think because when I was originally there, I was so isolated, I was completely alone. To come back amongst a large group of people with a job to do and with a very strong purpose, I think it was such a different representation of me that perhaps people wouldn't make the connection. It is interesting, the idea about the silence. I mean, when I first went back to Visegrad, I thought, when I was leaving Australia, that maybe I would have the opportunity to sit down with people and actually try and have conversations with them, but then I was strongly advised by people in Sarajevo that I consulted with not to do that, that wouldn't be a smart thing to do. And so it's an interesting thing. I went back sort of gauging my own reactions and I really wanted the idea of having open eyes in Visegrad, that I was aware of what happened rather than originally being such a naive tourist. But I haven't been able to sit down and directly talk to people, confront people about their opinion, and that would be quite an amazing thing to do. It would be great if somehow through the film we were able to start that discussion.
This is what we will try now with Bosnian distribution. We will really try to go to Visegrad and to other places where this story is not welcomed. We know that for sure, but we will try, because like now we wanted to show it in Banja Luka, which is dominant
capital city
of Serbian Republic, part of Bosnia, but we are waiting for the answer if they want to film, because my previous film was not allowed there. So if we don't get cinema, we will try to show it in alternative places and really invite young people to discuss.
Hi, good afternoon. I like the film very much. I want to congratulate you for it. And with the answers that you provided, I understand, therefore, that the people of Visegrad has a big has forgotten what happened in the Balkan War, and whether that can be generalized towards the Bosnian people as well. I've seen a Bosnian town which is quite machist, very sexist. Is the Bosnian people, are they very sexist or not? Thank you very much.
Pages. Just about this denial, what you mentioned, I think Talking about Bosnia, and I think it's always like in every other country where war just stopped or recently stopped, political power of the war is not diminished. The political powers are still integrated in politics today. There are still people in the school system, in politics, in government that were part of the war. So they definitely don't want to, police especially, but they don't want to judges. And you know, these forces are not, you know, of course, war criminals are captured, but many small people are still there, and they don't want these discussions to open, because then people will ask what they did during the war. And they are trying to keep their power still. So for them, it's really important that these kind of stories do not open, and that people in the city of Visegrad don't talk about it. And it's true for Bosnia. Victims have kind of denial of, not denial, but little suppression, because it's so hard to go on with life thinking about what happened. And also the, you know, these dominant politics want to forget what happens. And also European Union representatives in Bosnia, which are third very important political power in Bosnia, also force us to forget, saying, let's go on, which is another story how, I mean, Tim in a way represents this kind of politics. So that's yes, that's what I answer to you. It's not what I agree with. Oh, sorry, machoism. We didn't. Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. I think Bosnia is in a process of transformation. Which lasts for years. It used to be rural, family-based, man-dominant, sexist country, but I think it is transforming. After Second World War, during socialism, women were given education and jobs, so there was a big change in those years. And of course, it's a big struggle, because there is still a lot of remains of tradition and of machismo, but I see that it is changing and it is transforming. I mean, the dominance of men through the war and the aggression tells how much it's still there, definitely. Zoran, I think you are expert on this.
Maybe I could first add something to the first question, because, you know, because I don't have Muslim names, so it was possible for me to make some research in Visegrad, and people don't know me there, and so I met some people there, and it was very interesting for me. And I talked to them, and some of them told me, but you know, like some secret, but you know what this guy Lukic did in Visegrad. So that means Lukic is the biggest war criminal in Visegrad, and he did really unbelievable things, brutal and extreme. So it was important for me to see that people there, some of them are aware and of course did not forget what happened in front of their eyes. So that was very good, very, very important experience. And I don't know about macho type on Balkans. I think it's very contradictory process. After Second World War, as Jasmila said, there were some pretty strong emancipatory processes in this country. And what we have today is that this patriarchal model is coming back, first of all, through religion in all parts. At the same time, we have processes of emancipation and new groups in all countries. So I think it's a very, very contradictory process in the moment.
Yes, I want to talk about the tourist slant upon at a given moment is questioned, and as you've just mentioned, there's a denial, and the Bosnian people, it's very difficult for them to talk about their recent past. and it's very important that you talk about the past, but what moral authority, I don't know where you've addressed this, Kim, yourself, can someone have who's come from outside as a tourist or as a visitor from abroad to question that recent past of this country and to promote amongst the population that have still got that recent pain inside them. And there's a moment in the film that she talks to the cop and says, well, I was here while you were in Australia, and almost denying that right, if you catch what I'm saying. I'm not too sure how you approach this possible conflict.
For me, it was fantastic that somebody who has nothing to do with history can come and feel it with their inner human, ability to feel that something bad happened. And that person is not in any way connected to the history and Bosnia and Europe at all. So for me, it's big hope for human beings that we could feel each other even if we are not from the same cultures. Kim could talk from her perspective, but I think for Bosnian people will be great that somebody is recognizing what they can't talk about. I think it's very therapeutic moment when somebody else sees your pain and could communicate with your pain. So film also, in the film, Kim, and in her show and in her real life, Kim comes back and puts this flower, and for me that is really beautiful because she does something, even if it's totally very small thing. These flowers will die in one day, and somebody, cleaning lady, will throw them in the garbage. But there is something really beautiful in the action that when we can't do anything, we are still able to do something. I believe in energy, and this energy of Kim and energy of all of us who do little something for each other, I think is changing the world. Yesterday I read this letter in The Guardian of Nastasia from Pussy Riot, who is in the prison, and it would be the same to say what I have to do with Russia and how I can help her. She's in Russia, I have nothing to do with it, I don't know this woman. But because of these things that Kim did, I'm thinking maybe little thing, I could change something there. Maybe voice will help her. So for me, this film is about this little action, little moments that we outsiders, I think no human beings are outsiders, we are all very much involved what is happening and very much responsible, even if it looks we are not. So that's for me little hopeful gestures.
I think it's a really interesting dilemma, and it certainly has been with me the entire time through making the theatre show and the film. I was always, before I premiered the theatre show in Sydney, I showed it to a small group of Bosnian people because I was really concerned that they may say, who are you and what are you doing this for, and what right do you have to be doing this? And they were so supportive of the process and so supportive of the show that I was really pleased. For me, if Bosnian people don't support the show, then it's obviously, or the film, then it's failed in my mind. I think for me, I often was questioning my right to represent something that I wasn't a part of. And I think that's a really important question to constantly address, and also to become part of a history and part of things that occurred that are so far outside of my own experience as a person. But for me, this story, I think because of the accidental nature in how I got close to this story by staying in Vilna Vlas, which is something I'd never pursued in Bosnia, was really close access to atrocity or strong interest in atrocity. Somehow it really stayed with me, and I really didn't want it to. I wanted to let it go. I was being told by people it had nothing to do with me, and why was I talking about it still? But it really wouldn't let me go, and eventually I just felt I had to act or do some action, and so the idea to go back and create some sort of acknowledgement to the women that had been at Vilna Vlas was what I decided to do.
Yes, good morning. The questions for Kim. But above all, I believe that your story has a high degree of courage, by the way. And please, and don't misinterpret what I'm going to say. I don't understand, and this is related to what your colleague sees, that connection that may exist, that a person from Australia come and removes people's awareness and consciousness in Serbia. First question is, Serbia, was it on a holiday just because you were there, or was there any connection that you wanted to go to Serbia beforehand? And secondly, any similar action, are you going to do any similar action locally? Because unfortunately, human catastrophes occur all over the place, and in Australia, I imagine. I'm not an expert on Australia, but I think the Aborigines have also have put up with their own. So thank you very much beforehand. Could you answer those two questions? Thanks.
The whole journey of getting to Visegrad and getting to Bosnia is quite beautifully accidental in a way. I was just travelling overseas in 2005, and a friend of mine from Sydney who's Serbian was in Belgrade, and she invited me to visit. And I visited her in Belgrade. I really enjoyed the city, I enjoyed the people, and I returned there a few years later to do a theatre workshop for a month. I worked with a theatre group of political theatre, an all-female group, and they were fantastic. And in the intervening years, I had read the book The Bridge over the Drina by Ivo Andrić. It had been recommended to me by somebody, and I read it. And because I was Australian, and when you come from Australia, the idea of being in Europe and being able to jump from country to country is always fascinating. So I found myself in Belgrade and decided to see more of the Balkans and decided to go across to Sarajevo. And then, you know, I found myself thinking it's only 2.5 hours on a bus and I get to stand on the bridge that I read, and I really enjoyed reading the book. And so it was very spontaneous. The weekend I arrived, as you saw in the film, was a festival weekend, which meant the only hotel that had a room available was Vila na Vlas. The smaller hotels in the city were full. And also I'd read about it in the guidebook, so it was a logical situation. So everything happened very rapidly, very quickly, no great forethought or planning. It was just a typical tourist sort of situation. I totally agree with what you're saying about Australia and about the world in general. I think this sort of situation and these ideas of denial are not alone in Bosnia, and they're certainly very, very present in Australia. And I would very much consider myself part of that. I'm not, you know, I'm a white Australian, and in Australia I really believe there are two countries within Australia. There's a very affluent white Australian nation, and there's a very, very impoverished black Australian nation with a lot of problems which are not being addressed by me, by other people, by the government. And so we have a very strong situation of denial there. It was interesting for me with the theatre show, a lot of people in the foyer afterwards talked to me about Australia, talked about the links with Australia, and I really, really liked that, and I think the film will do the same thing. I think this idea of denial is universal and can be found across the world, and if I can play a role in any other way, in any other scenario, I would very happily do that.
And I would just say that as an Australian, maybe she was more sensitive to this story than any other nation, because I know some people who were in Vila na Vlas and also felt the same, but they didn't do the show. They didn't do effort after. I have feeling it's also Kim's subconscious thing to be Australian and to be aware, consciously or subconsciously, about it, to make this effort. And as a film, if we say, that's why we didn't put on a film a true story, because we wanted film to be independent from, you know, is it real or not real? It should be a film by itself. It should raise a question, is Kim also having a denial? You know, is she going to her own opening of the things that are suppressed?
Further questions, please? ¿Alguna pregunta más?
Any further questions? Yes, there's one there. Hi, good morning. I want to take full advantage now to ask whether the last image at the ending on the bridge, does that indicate anything to, does the actress or the protagonist, you do anything on the bridge? Because in the hotel you do leave some roses or a flower or margaritas, daisies, I think he said, in homage to those that were raped, the women that were raped. On the bridge, did something happen on the bridge as well of that nature? Thank you very much in that last scene.
No, I think the simplest answer is no. I mean, the bridge is also playing a large part in the film. And for me, for whatever reason, the connection with the women at the hotel was very, very strong. I think because I'm a woman and because of the closeness of this idea of sleeping in a bed where many women have been raped and killed was so beyond my comprehension that somehow I had a very strong connection with that. And I think also possibly because it was a private space. The bridge for me is I feel that the whole bridge itself exists as a monument in my mind. It is a monument, and it's a monument to the genocide that happened in Visegrad. It doesn't seem to me anymore to look like a bridge. It looks like a very large and awful monument. Every year in May, a lot of people travel back to Visegrad. It is the only time they travel back, and they perform a memorial. They put around 3,000 flowers into the river from the bridge to acknowledge the 3,000 victims from Visegrad. That was during the entire war. And I would very much like to be part of that in the future. I haven't been able to, unfortunately, due to timing. But yeah, I mean, there are many, many sites. Also the house at Pioniska Street and lots of other things. I think for me, the discussion that I would love to see happen is the ability for memorials to be built in Visegrad. That's a very controversial idea at the moment. And if there can be memorials built that are permanent rather than temporary like mine, then that would be fascinating and really wonderful development, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I'd also like to ask a more general question, particularly to the people in the media in Bosnia, and is the question of there being a silence, being able to maintain a silence in a small country, collection of countries where there's mutually intelligible languages, where presumably one can turn on the television and see the television from the other side. It's, when you think that, we were told that the Iron Curtain fell in '89 because it was no longer sustainable with modern media. And yet here we are in 2013, and somehow we seem to be in the middle of Europe, and still these walls are there. I mean, how can you say anything about how easy or difficult it is, say, for a young person in Visegrad to hear what people think or say in Sarajevo, for instance?
Yeah, it's a mystery. I hope somebody will solve it soon. But young people do communicate more, and they are my big hope that the information will travel. The thing is not that information are missing. It's ability to accept and to say, to distinguish yourself from the nation. That's the first thing that people are still not able to perform. They think, if, for example, we had our film, Grbavica, my first film, in Belgrade in 2006, and there were 200 young boys with T-shirts of Karadžić and Mladić, these two war criminals. These young boys were not even born during the war, so they have nothing to do. Their parents maybe could be blamed, but these kids have nothing to do. It's their need to be identified as a group. And what we are missing in Balkan in general, in my opinion, is to individualize, to say, I don't necessarily respect what my nation, what my group, what my religion, whatever is doing. I'm able to criticize it and still keep my own integrity. That's what is missing, not information. Informations are there. And again, people, a lot of people got many advantages from war. They got other people's houses, properties, jobs, and they, of course, don't want to say what happened because they will lose position.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Any further questions? If such isn't the case, thank you very much.